Welcome back to the Nerdy Grail and welcome to the 8th video in this ranking every episode from every Doctor series. In previous videos we have looked at the 15th, 13th, 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 7th and 8th together Doctors. And in today's video, as you can see by the Colin Baker box sets from the collection range behind me, we are going to be looking at ranking every 6th Doctor story in a tier list format. And remember, with all these videos, this is just my personal opinion. Now, the Colin Baker era was really short. He doesn't have many stories in his era. And I don't think Colin Baker was truly given a fair shot. You know, his era was cut dramatically short. And I think his era is totally underrated. And it's an era that I thoroughly enjoyed going back to binge and watch, and he does have some really good stories in his era. And also, Colin Baker is debatably one of the best Big Finish Doctors as well. If you want to get a true look at what the 6th Doctor was capable of, listen to some of his Big Finish audios as well, because he is amazing there. And I love his on-screen appearances as well. Colin Baker, I've met him multiple times at different conventions. He's a lovely guy and is always willing to talk and chat Doctor Who with the fans. So it's a pleasure to be able to do this ranking video. So I'm going to waste no more time and we're going to jump straight in to ranking every 6th Doctor story played by the amazing Colin Baker. Okay, and here is my tier list ranking every 6th Doctor episode. Now, as you can see, there's not a lot of episodes to talk about here. Only 11 in total to actually discuss. Like I said, his era on screen was cut dramatically short. But he does have some really interesting episodes, some really good episodes, and some episodes that aren't as great, but we'll get into those shortly. We've got our categories as usual. So the first category, which is the top of the shot, best of the best. This is a situation that requires tact and finesse. Fortunately, I am blessed with both. Then we got the stories which are good. They're not quite fantastic, but they are good stories. I would suggest, Perry, that you wait a little before criticising my new persona. You may find it isn't quite as disagreeable as you think. Then we got the okay ones. So planets come and go, stars perish, matter disperses, coalesces, forms into other patterns, other worlds. Nothing can be eternal. Then we got the stories which are not terrible, but they are bad stories in my opinion. Well, since we're insulting each other, I can't say I care much for your taste in clothes. Doesn't do a thing for you. And then bottom of the barrel, awful stories. We've got, in all my travellings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization, decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. So, let's begin with a story known as The Twin Dilemma, which came at the tail end of Peter Davison's final series in season 21, following on from the fantastic story that is The Caves of Androzani. Now, this does get a lot of scrutiny because of the way the Doctor acts, and yeah, the plot isn't very good, if I'm perfectly honest, and the villain isn't very good. I would say it is not the best story, especially compared to stories such as The Caves of Androzani in that series. It is a massive drop-off. And yeah, it is a bad story. But, if I'm being honest, even though I've put it in bad, I do have a little bit of fun with it, a bit like Time and the Rani from my previous video, because it is entertaining to see the Doctor go off the wall. You know, he does some bizarre things, case in point, strangling his companion. But it is funny to watch him, like, flip out all the time. That's the entertainment. But I can't deny the plot is paper thin. The villain of Mestor is very poor. The twins are really not very engaging and entertaining. The only entertaining part is obviously Colin going off the wall. But it is very un-Doctor-like. And yes, he had a traumatic regeneration, but still, it's not the best look. So unfortunately, it is bad. But I'm not going to put it as terrible because I do have some fun with it. I was teetering whether or not to put it in okay, but then when I was thinking about other stories which I think are okay, I couldn't put it in the same line as them. Attack of the Cybermen, I think, is a good story. I quite like Attack of the Cybermen. I'm a massive Cyberman fan. The Cybermen are my second favourite villains in all of Doctor Who history, the first being Ice Warriors. I do prefer the Cybermen to the Daleks, and I think especially in Classic Who, the Cybermen are done brilliantly. And this story is also quite interesting because it almost feels like an anniversary story because he goes back to Totter's Lane, he goes back to the junkyard. We get to see the TARDIS actually transform into different things. We've also got tying up some plot lines from other previous Cybermen stories, such as Tomb of the Cybermen, and in particular the 10th Planet. So it was tying all these things together. Lytton returns from the previous series, who was in Resurrection of the Daleks. So it really does feel almost like an anniversary, a celebration of the Cybermen and of Doctor Who. It's quite interesting, to be honest. I like what they do with Telos. I like the Cryons as well. Really interesting designed alien species, really creepy voices. I quite like them, to be honest. And also pays homage to Doctor Who The Invasion as well, the Cybermen in the sewers, in the underground, you know, in underneath London. It is interesting. It is a good story, with a good set of characters, good settings, you know, present day Earth, then going to Telos, and then going into like the under city where the Cryons are lurking around. It is interesting. Vengeance on Varos is definitely going top of the shop. It is a really, really dark story, which introduces a villain in Doctor Who, which I hoped and prayed would return, and I would love to return on the screen, you know, at least in some way, shape or form, is that of Syl. Syl is a ridiculously good, creepy, sinister, playful, in some regards, villain. He is really, really disgusting. And in a story like Vengeance on Varos, which is basically a prison stroke torture planet, where the people are basically watching people be punished for entertainment, it's like perfect. You know, the Doctor's on top form, Peri's on top form. You know, the Doctor and Peri have basically landed on this planet because the TARDIS is out of action and they need a special element to help boost the TARDIS's power back up and get it back up and running. But they obviously get entangled with all the torments that go on the planet of Varos. It's a very political story as well, but it does it in a perfect way. I love Vengeance on Varos. I know it's like a cult classic for people, and it earns its spot at the top, to be honest, because it is an entertaining one, and it is a Colin Baker story that I've gone back to watch numerous times. Mark of the Rani, I think, is okay. I think Ark of the Rani is an okay story. I did recently watch it before Wishworld and all came out, because obviously we got the reveal that Mrs. Flood was the Rani, and so we thought, well, let's go back and watch some of the Rani stories, you know, so we can, you know, get used to what the character was like before. So I rewatched Mark of the Rani. It's an okay story. The Rani as a villain in Classic Who was interesting, you know. She was experimenting with people. She was like turning people into her slaves. She was making them. She was experimenting on them, testing their aggressive levels. The Master was randomly in the story. He didn't really need to be in the story, but it was an okay story. And for it being the only story in Colin's era that delves into the past, it was all right. It was an okay story. I can't deny, but it wasn't anything spectacular. The Rani as an invention for a new Time Lord was nice, because obviously at this point in time the Master had been in Doctor Who an awful lot, so giving us another new Time Lord was nice. And she is definitely the somewhere between the Master and the Doctor. She's not quite as evil as the Master to a degree, but she's definitely not a hero like the Doctor, because, you know, she's not there to take over the world per se. She's just sees everything as an experiment to her. So she's not heroic, but she's not pure evil. But she does teeter between. She can go either way, you know. She does tend to go more the villainous route, but, you know, you can sort of sway her with logic per se. But yeah, it's an okay story. Nothing spectacular, though. It does drag occasionally. The Two Doctors. Now, in my personal opinion, I really like the Two Doctors, so I'm putting the Two Doctors up here. I know there'll be people that wouldn't agree and say that it's only a good story or an okay story, and that's perfectly fine. There's something about the Doctor interacting with Jamie, the Sixth Doctor interacting with Jamie, because this is a multi-Doctor story, just a random multi-Doctor story with the Sixth and Second Doctor, so Patrick Troughton returns again, with Fraser Hines playing Jamie. Basically, the Sixth Doctor is sent to help his previous incarnation, who gets captured by the Sontarans and is being used in experimentations to turn him into an androgum, and so that the Sontarans can find out the secrets of time travel. There's some really good characters in this. Like I said, the combination of Six, Perry, and Jamie is phenomenal. I would see a whole season of stories that was those three in particular, because Jamie surprisingly works really well with the Sixth Doctor, and the Sixth Doctor works quite well with Jamie. So I thought it was really interesting. 2 doesn't spend an awful lot of time with Jamie in this story because he's separated for most of the story. So it is interesting to see Jamie interact with a new Doctor. 2 is good when he's on screen, but he doesn't have an awful lot to do because he's captured for the first, like, almost 3/4 of the story. So 2 doesn't actually do an awful lot. It's interesting when he is turned into an androgum and goes on a food hunting spree with actual androgum Shockeye. I thought that was really interesting. There is a few dark moments and some dark deaths in this episode as well. Shockeye's like this butcher character, but the Doctor, the Sixth Doctor, takes him out in a very disturbing way. If you've seen the story, you know what I mean. The Sontarans aren't actually a major part of the story per se. Obviously, it revolves around them wanting to get back to fighting their war with the Rutans. But really, it's Chesini and Shockeye and Dastari who are the main villains. The Sontarans are almost like a bit of an extra in this story. And I always found their design in this story a bit odd. If I had to give a negative, their design was odd because I thought Sontarans, they were supposed to be a clone race, so they're supposed to be pretty much the same. But these Sontarans have different facial features. They're much different in height. Their costumes don't look the best either. They are a bit all over the place, if I'm honest. But it is interesting to see the Sontarans again. The next story then we have is Time Lash. Now, Time Lash, yeah, unfortunately, is not the best story either. I'm really not a fan of Time Lash. Upon rewatch, these two could fluctuate and swap, but I'm not a fan of Time Lash at all. I did recently rewatch it, but I found myself getting distracted. I found myself not really engaging with the story, and I wanted to. I really wanted to. You know, a lot of people say Time Lash is the worst story for Colin Baker, and, you know, I try not to, like, follow the crowd. But upon rewatch, it's hard to disagree. It's not the best. The way the Doctor acts towards Perry is really off in this story. The visuals, even on the updated effects version for the Blu-ray box set, isn't the best. The Borad is an interesting concept. I did find it weird that this story, I believe, was based on like a previous comic or an adventure that we've not actually seen on screen, something along those lines with the third Doctor and Joe. I did think it was a bit weird to go down that route, if I'm being perfectly honest. So I don't really know why they did that per se. They probably shouldn't have gone down that route. You know, the links to H.G. Wells with Herbert was interesting, but was it really needed? You know, it was just a bit of an all over the place story, if I'm honest. It's not one that I go back to rewatch. If I watch the Colin Baker era, I'm more likely to skip this story than others. Then we got Revelation of the Daleks. Now, unpopular opinion, well, maybe unpopular opinion. I actually really enjoy Revelation of the Daleks as well. I think Revelation of the Daleks is a solid Doctor Who story. I like the dark themes in this one, that the Daleks are pretty much cannibalizing people. They're turning humans into food and then feeding them back to the planet. I think Davros in this story calls it like human recycling pretty much, or something along those lines. Someone says something along those lines, maybe not those exact words, I can't quite remember now, but that's pretty much what it is, you know, and it's really dark. You know, the Doctor and Perry go to the planet Necros, you know, to pay respects to a fallen friend of the Doctor's, and then they get entangled with the Daleks then. There's some really good characters. Davros has established himself as the great healer, you know, there's assassins out to get him, which are really fun characters as well. We get to see the Glass Dalek. It's really dark. Really, really dark. And Davros loses his hand in this one, which for New Who fans, when you see Davros with the robot metallic hand, I like to think that that's the connection there. But yeah, it's a really good story. I thoroughly enjoy it anyway, and I like the snowy setting at the start with Necros. I wish we could have had more on the outer layers of Necros rather than the internal catacombs of Necros. I mean, it suits the theme, but I quite love to have seen the Daleks in the snow, you know? I thought that would have been cool. But yeah, I really enjoy Revelation of the Daleks, and it's one that I go back to rewatch an awful lot. Then we got Trial of a Time Lord. I'm a bit all over the place with Trial of a Time Lord, to be perfectly honest. You'll see that now and here. So Mysterious Planet, I think, is okay. It's an okay start to Trial of the Time Lord. It's nothing spectacular. I love the introduction of the character of Glitz. Glitz is fantastic, and he's at his best in Trial of the Time Lord as opposed to when he comes back in Dragonfire. But he's really good, and he has a little assistant or henchman with him, Dibber. Hilarious duo the pair of them are, really good. The Doctor's been put on trial by the Valiard and by the Time Lords, the High Council, for his meddlings across time and space, and if he loses, then the Valiard wants to have the Doctor basically be killed or take his future regenerations off him. We all find out in the end it's all to do with a big plot line that, you know, the Valiard is secretly the Doctor, and it's the dark side of the Doctor that wants to eliminate the good side of the Doctor, pretty much. But this one, the Doctor lands on a planet called Ravelox, because this is one of the visuals we see on screen, a story that the Doctor uses as evidence in his defence. Ravelox to prevent a catastrophe from happening, and they find out the Ravelox is actually Earth that's been moved out of place in time. But there's the Overcity, which is like a wasteland where there's this like cult of people living out, savages, and then there's an Undercity, which is in the London Underground, where this futuristic land has been built up by this robot called Drafro for like super intelligent, highly intelligent beings who are going to eventually take over the overside of the city. It's an okay start, not the best though. Mind Warp, I think, is a good one. I've enjoyed it more and more on rewatch. It brings back Syl, and we actually get to Syl's home planet in this story as well, which is really good. This is also the final story for Nicola Bryant, who plays Perry. She supposedly dies in this story, but then we find out later that she actually survived. It was a bit all over the place at the time, but it's really dark. The Doctor goes to Forest Beta, I believe the planet's called. Beautiful place, you know, on the outside. Again, wish we could have seen more of the outside rather than the Undercity. But they go to Syl's home planet because they've been hearing some goings-on about the place. Stumble across Syl and get tangled up in his experiments. Their major experiment is to help save the life of the Lord Kiv, another of Syl's race whose brain is expanding and can't fit his body anymore, and so they want to transfer him into a new body so that he'll go on living. And in the end, Brian Blessed's also in this story as well, who fancies Perry, King Yrcanos, which we find out later, apparently Perry married King Yrcanos. It's all a bit weird. But the Doctor gets corrupted at the end of part 1, and for the rest of the story, he's actually a villain. He's on Syl's side, and you get to see him torture Perry and be horrible. It is really dark, but I think that's what makes it interesting, is you get to see your hero be an antagonist. But it is quite sad that that was his last interaction with Perry. I get a bit of like Shooty and Millie vibes in Reality War, where the Doctor ends it with a companion on a sour note. But it is what it is. Then you've got Terror of the Vervoids. I think Terror of the Vervoids, like Mind Warp, is also really good. I debatably could put it up in the top bracket. I really enjoy it. It's a story that apparently is set in the future, so future events. We've lost Perry. We've now got Bonnie Langford, who plays Mel. They're on this space station, this a spaceship, which is like carrying some precious cargo. It's basically like a whodunit. There's like a murder mystery. There's this plant creature known as the Vervoids, who are breaking out of hibernation and basically killing everyone on the spaceship, and they're trying to figure out who's doing it. The Doctor ends up committing genocide, which triggers a final plot line in Trial of a Time Lord. I think the relationship between Bonnie Langford and Colin Baker is really, really good. You know, you believe that they've been travelling together despite what the show tells you, because this isn't Mel's introduction story. It is for us as fans, but in the canon of the show, the Doctor and Mel have been travelling together for ages. But they do paint them as having a good relationship really well. You believe that they've travelled together for ages, which I think is really hard to do. So the fact they were able to convince us is really good. And I like it. I like the closed spaces because there's narrow corridors. It's all set in like people's rooms, you know. It's done really, really well. Perfect atmosphere as well. And then finally, we have the ultimate foe, the final Colin Baker, which unfortunately for me is going down here. Like I said, I've got a very mixed opinion on Trial of a Time Lord, if I'm perfectly honest. I'd say, like Twin Dilemma, it's a bad story, but there's some fun aspects to it. like the Doctor getting pulled under sand by these weird hands, the return of Sabalon Glitz, the return of Anthony Ainley's Master, who, again, wasn't really needed, but he was there just to basically say, the Doctor's been right all along. You know, so Doctor all through the series has been saying, the Matrix can be tampered with, the Matrix can be penetrated, you know, all this evidence has been distorted and it's a lie. And the Masters basically comes in and says, yeah, it's true. The Doctor's telling the truth and, you know, I'm the only one who can kill him, you know. He hates the fact that the Valeyard's almost going to take him down and it's not him. It's a fun little story, but it's a very bad end to an era. It's very rushed, but there was a reason behind it being rushed, which I understand, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it, you know, there wasn't reasons, but it's hard to then, you know, deny that it was a rushed end to it, which is why it's only a two-parter as well. It's okay. The wackiness of inside the Matrix is nice to see, and it's good to actually see inside the Matrix properly. We got like a glimpse in Arc of Infinity, but to see the Doctor actually travel through it properly and walk amongst it is really, really nice. The Doctor's final words of carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice, sending Colin Baker off into time and space to turn into Sylvester McCoy, is always going to be a bit embarrassing, but it ends also on a cliffhanger that the Valeyard is actually still alive, and will he ever come back? Who knows? But that is going to be my ranking of every single 6th Doctor story. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on the Colin Baker era, and subscribe if you are new. So now that we've done the 6th Doctor, the next video will be on the 5th Doctor, played by Peter Davison. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.